Now we're going to move on to analyzing some other types of non-traditional language and literature texts. So this is an ad. You can pause the video if you want to think about how you would, approach this. So let's just take a look. So there are French fries in the bottom. It says Eid Mubarak, which is a Muslim festival. And then there's a McDonald's sign there. So some things that immediately you can look at without actually going into any in-depth analysis is composition, color, and text. So composition-wise, the fries are in the foreground. The background, there are stars, there's a moon. Color, the fries are obviously the color of fries, and it's a good contrast between the dark background and this is light, so it draws emphasis. Eid Mubarak on the top right, and the McDonald's logo, which is branding and consumerism as well. So let's move on to the next slide. So I already wrote some things here. So text type is a visual advertisement. Elements, image of the fries, the color, the dark versus the light, the composition, like the fries are set in the front. The contrast, the yellow and the black. So for the audience, I thought that the primary audience would be Muslim customers because Eid is basically a bit of context here. So, when you break your fast at the end of Ramadan, McDonald's is trying to promote their fries for people to break their fast using. I said that the primary audience are the Muslim customers and secondary can be general consumers of McDonald's. So, you can argue either, but I think as long as you have some type of defense or a way to back up your statement. The purpose, I said, was to sell McDonald's as a way of the Muslim consumers to break their fast. And, McDonald's wants to support consumers and tell them, break your fast with McDonald's. That's the best way to do it. Context, like I said, Eid Mubarak is a religious holiday celebrated by Muslims worldwide that marks the end of Ramadan, which is a period of fasting. So subject-wise, they're selling French fries, but the figurative also, the other kind of purpose is that McDonald's is supporting Muslims during Eid Mubarak. They're trying to, the purpose here is to sell fries as well, and McDonald's food in general. And some big ideas here could be religion, identity, community, acceptance, and culture, because there's a lot here about Muslim religion and the culture, but also kind of the influence of popular culture. McDonald's is more associated with Western world and popular culture, etc. But also how the company is accepting of the Muslim traditions and etc. So you can talk a lot about those types of things. So that was just analysis. But in general, when you're faced with advertisements, you do want to talk a lot about color, facial expression, if there are any character, text, the layout of the text, this and that, and what is being emphasized, and etc. And you also do want to think about the context as well, because a lot of times the devices that you use will go straight into analyzing the context and the purpose. We're going to do another one now, another kind of, this is not really an ad, the next one is a propaganda poster. So just look on the right for now. So the propaganda poster is called Crime Does Not Pay, and it might be hard to read the speech bubble, so I'll just read it out. So the left side says there's a man holding on to another man and saying, "Why don't you quit farming and join the guerrillas? You can make plenty more money." And the man asks him, "What must I do?" "All you have to do is cut the Japanese army communication lines. A bit dangerous, yes, but boy, the money you can make." And then on the bottom left, there's a bang, and then right, you can see in the background there's a graveyard, and then the foreground family that says, "Poor fool, if only he worked honestly." And the girl says, "Yes, you're right, dear, let's be honest and happy." So this one also requires a lot of cultural context, and probably your teacher would provide that to you. This is basically, like you can see on the left side of the screen, the context of the Japanese Imperial Army in the Philippines when the Japanese Imperial Army was in the Philippines during the Second World War. Some terms to define would be guerrilla fighters. So guerrilla fighters were Filipino people who would join groups to try to fight the Japanese. The audience here in general would be the Filipino people. You can come up with a secondary audience as well, but just to speed up this analysis a bit, I just came up with Filipino people. The purpose would be, for me to show the dangers of becoming guerrilla fighter as a Filipino and straying away from normal life. As we can see at the bottom right, in the end, they're saying, if only he continued working, if only he continued farming, it would be okay. For visual devices, there's a speech bubble with a bang, there's sound effects, special effects lettering, motion lines, etc. So let me break that down a little bit. So on the top left, You can talk about the actions of the one person holding onto the other, kind of like a controlling position. And the other guy, they're like motion lines coming out of his head to show that he's like anxious and stressed. And on the right, you can see, you know, with the hand movements, kind of like this is very secretive and kind of almost suspicious, like they're plotting something. And on the bottom left, you can see that there's a shadow of the person at the background to emphasize that, you know, he was shot. And there's a big kind of onomatopoeia with the bang in the front to draw attention to the gunshot, to show that the minute the guy became a guerrilla fighter, you know, he was shot. And then on the right, you can see in the background, there's a graveyard. In the foreground, there's a very humble, simple Filipino family talking about, you know, there's like a little bit of appeals to family and a simple life there. In terms of literary devices, we can talk about a little bit about foreshadowing, you know, at the top right where it says it's a bit dangerous, clearly because he was shot in the next slide. There's a tone of pity as well on the bottom right where the guy says, poor fool, if only he worked honestly. There's also alliteration with the yes, you're right, let's be honest and happy, which shows a lot about the values as well that this propaganda poster is kind of trying to evoke, in a sense that, you know, the title is Crime Does Not Pay. Crime Does Not Pay, which is kind of just talking about how, you know, violence is never, you know, joining into the violence is never necessarily a good thing. So now I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit of analysis. I know there's a lot of text here, but we'll just go through it. So this is a paragraph analyzing just the visual techniques of this propaganda poster. The text uses visual elements as backgrounds, motion lines, scene-to-scene transitions, and shadows to offer character details and highlight the cause and consequences of adopting a dangerous guerrilla lifestyle. So already in the beginning, you can see that I listed the devices that I'm going to talk about. You don't just want to list what the text does or what the paragraph is going to be about. You always want to include the why. You know, why is it being used? So to offer character details and highlight the cause and consequences of adopting a guerrilla lifestyle. Let's continue. The first panel shows a background of trees and crops to provide characterization and some context into the farmer's farmer lifestyle. The other character, the instigator, has his hands around the farmer's neck, showing a sign of possessiveness and forcefulness. There are motion lines around the farmer's head and then also why, to demonstrate shock and stress. Talking about the literary device or the visual element and then what it does. Moving on, the second panel shows both characters with furrowed eyebrows, with the instigator putting his hand close to his mouth as one does when plotting some secret plan. So again, talking about facials and body actions. There's a scene-to-scene transition. So scene-to-scene transitions or action-to-action or moment-to-moment transitions are very important to remember for graphic novels or comics, showing time or tone or temporal shifts. There's a scene-to-scene transition between the second and third panel where there's a drastic mood switch. The farmer has been shot. The third panel employs special effects lettering with the word bang to allow the reader to almost hear the auditory imagery. The farmer is simply drawn as a black shadow with no distinguishable features to characterize him as part of the many other Filipinos who died as guerrilla fighters. There's another scene-to-scene transition that demonstrates a time shift from the third to the fourth panel. A Filipino couple sits in the forefront of the image, commenting on the death of the farmer as shown by the crucifix in the background of the image. The straw hat of the husband and the dress of the wife are quite typical of what one may see in the Philippines, allowing the Filipino reader to relate with their morals. Overall, the visual elements allow the reader to understand the intentions of each of the characters and agree with the dire consequences of resorting to crime. So this isn't like the best paragraph, but I think it does a pretty good job of listing a lot of devices and why it was used as well. So, when you're doing your analysis, try to always have multiple devices. Over here, I think in order to show you guys how I would do it, I kind of analyze the entire thing all in one paragraph, but typically, maybe do it a few at a time. I just wanted to end off with a few things. So whether it be paper one or your IO, always when you find a text advertisement, just make sure that you use Steep Claim in the beginning to figure out the title, the elements, the author, purpose, message, and literary devices can come a bit later. But, when you're annotating, you always want to kind of like how I was doing with the song, you always want to annotate with different colors to figure out different literary devices. And then so that when you're writing or when you're speaking and preparing your script, you can focus on the why instead of the what. So when you already label the what when you're annotating, you can focus on the why while you're writing. So, what? There are motion lines around the farmer's head. Why? To show the stress and anxiety of being pulled into a guerrilla lifestyle. So something like that, it's very important. I think, there are many different types of literary devices that I'm sure you've all learned, but when it comes to ads and things like that, you definitely want to use visual features as well, such as color, composition, foreground, background, facial expressions of characters, if there is anything like that. The other literary devices like symbolism, appeals, simile, metaphor, personification, foreshadowing, those all kind of stay the same. And if you guys ever need any more support, feel free to join the IBlieve community Slack on the IBlieve.org website.